Hello, and welcome to another edition of Blind Eye Live. I am your host, Hunter King. Hopefully, my internet issue from Friday has been resolved. And so for the show today, we're gonna cover a topic I was gonna cover Friday and just never got to. Show ended up running longer, and I figured I would lead off today, and that is the shifting landscape in college football right now. I might get into today. I think I'm going to do it for tomorrow's show. I'm going to talk about my idea for realignment of the Southeastern Conference with Texas and Oklahoma joining. I think I'm going to save that for tomorrow. And next week, I'm going to start doing my division by division draft preview. Well, I say division by division. I'm going to take 2 divisions per show next week and just outline draft needs for every team. I'll have their picks up, everything, or at least that's what I'm hoping. I'll either find or I will make a resource for that. I'm also finalizing my draft rankings right now. I've still got a good number of prospects I want to get through, but most of those guys are down towards the bottom of any ranking set anyway. Some of these guys won't get drafted. I'm trying to get to on the level of like the professionals and get like 300 prospects graded, but I'm just not as good as those guys yet. But I'm on pace to be well over 200 this year. Hopefully by the draft, I think I can get to 250. And when I say 250, I mean 250 complete, like, I've watched as everything I can get my hands on. I feel really good about my overall grade on a player, my overall feel for that player, understanding of their game. Like I feel like I've done a complete professional job, or at least I would say as close as I can get to professional as an amateur. Yeah, that was great. Accidentally yanked my camera there. I've got to figure out a new setup for my stuff. Okay, there we go. So anyway, as I was saying before I, yanked my camera down, there's too many wires directly in front of me, and I was moving my headset cord, and it pulled the camera one. I might be able to run this back behind for where I've got it now. Anyway, sorry. I'll deal with that another time. Like I was saying, I've got about 200 or so, or I think I'm at like 206. No. I'm at 200. I'm at 212 full evals right now. So, and I'm working on kind of finalizing my rankings, but those will be, or I might post those to Twitter eventually. At some point, once I have an audience, I'll probably have a Patreon, and I'll put that under some like super cheap tier. Like if people want to support me, they can get it. I'm not going to be, or at least it's going to be a long time before I'm at like the Matt Whitman level where I've got full scouting reports, types of, 'cause that's a lot of work. And, like the typing part, not the watching. I love the watching football and everything, but anyway, that's talking about the future. But we're gonna get into division by division stuff. I'll do like the AFC and NFC East probably the first day, then go like AFC, NFC North. That's how I'm gonna do it. Haven't decided on the order, but I think I'm gonna start with the East. Yeah. With 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 that out of the way. Today, I'm gonna start because this one's gonna be quick. The second one will be longer. Because that's going to be the bulk of the show, is talking about college football and how things are, how I see different programs rising, falling, what have you, and realignment, which is hitting in the next or over the next few years. There's a really big issue right now with like rest in the NBA and the idea of like players needing load management, if you will. And there's a part of that where I get it. It's like, you know what? We're trying to win championships. The playoffs are what matters. We need to make sure we're not overworking like our star players. And here's the thing. You see that in like European soccer a lot. And just in soccer in general a lot. Rotating players. Of course, there's so much running and constant movement in that sport, and you're playing a game every 3 days, and in some stretches, maybe even more often. But, I mean, I played soccer. I know how much running and whatnot that entails. But there is the idea that you look back and the NBA's been playing 82-game season schedules for a very, very long time. And I'll use this as an example. John Stockton, in 16 of his 19 NBA seasons, played a full 82-game season. And he played during a far more violent era of basketball. And he managed to do that. Now, I saw people, and I'm trying to remember exactly what the statistic was for LeBron James, but it was like he'd done it once or hadn't done it, period, in his NBA career. And I get the league's changed, and I get, guys get nicked up injuries. Guys don't play hurt like they used to either. And I'll say this, I'm okay with that. These are big-time investments, and you've got to think about the long haul of a season. Like, do you really want your star player playing on a sprained ankle? Or an injury that maybe you don't know how serious and severe it is? Really. And, how likely it is to be aggravated. We have come a long way on sports science. But I hear a lot of people saying, the solution to the problem is just shorten the season. And that'll allow us to get to the important games quicker. And to me, once again, this thing. And to me, that's a casual response. Oh, the playoffs are all that matter. And I hear it with college football and the expansion stuff. We need more games that really matter. Every game matters to somebody. To me, every game matters. It's a chance for those players to go out and show how good they are, how much they care. To put good tape on film for scouts, or just to show out for themselves. Be a part of the team. And for like some of these, mismatched games, with smaller teams, it's given them a chance to have put themselves in front of scouts. Because you get some of these FCS schools, I believe his name's Jacoby Durant out of South Carolina State. That guy put on some awesome tape against Clemson. He was the best player on the field in that game. I say that completely serious. 2 interceptions against Clemson. That guy was as good as any player on the field when he played Clemson. If he doesn't get that opportunity, instead of being a guy who I think could go in the 3rd round, and if a team really loves his tape as much as I like his tape, he could end up in the late 2nd round. I don't think that's going to happen. But this guy's going to go, this guy will be gone before the 4th round's over. For sure. At least he should be if you've watched his tape. And I like I said, I think he's a borderline top 100 player in this draft. Those guys don't get a chance if you eliminate these games like some people want. Anyway, back to the NBA and the issue of rest. Sorry. My draft soapboxes. Or my college football soapboxes that I get on. I get the idea with sports science. I get the idea of the idea of sports science. Like, I love the advances we've made on the medical side for sports, taking care of athletes, allowing us to better diagnose injuries, prevent injuries, rehab injuries, get players back to as close as they can, if not back to their old selves, as we've seen Kevin Durant do on multiple different occasions now. But, I've heard LeBron James called an Iron Man, and he's not an Iron Man. Yes, he's made it so super long into his career, but there are other players that have made it that far in their career, and I see people talk about minutes played, and there's that, but it's a softer league now, and for the better. Like, I prefer the modern product. I think we're seeing more basketball and less fighting, and that's always good. Basketball's always supposed to have been a skill sport, and we're seeing that now. With guys not getting mauled going to the basket, you get to have guys like Ja Morant and Trae Young. Which Ja Morant has a lot of athleticism, like he probably would have survived. Trae Young's skill, now if you transport him back, he might not have been allowed to play the way he plays. So he wouldn't have physically held up probably. But, we can't know that for sure. But it is irritating when you see, like, oh, that guy's not playing for rest. Or load management. Because that was the term that crept up when Kawhi Leonard was in Toronto. Load management. Now, they ended up winning a title. It was great for them. And honestly, I'd argue that Toronto right now is in a better spot than they would have been if Kawhi was there, just because Kawhi keeps getting hurt. Despite the load management, because that continued in LA, Kawhi's still getting hurt. This isn't like when Derrick Rose knee gave out because they ran a shortened season, a condensed season, but they packed as many games as they possibly could in that condensed time, and they played like 66 games in the span of time that usually they would have played like maybe 50. or so, and that was just the regular season. That's not even including the playoffs, because they were in the playoffs towards the end of a series that they won, but they might have won the finals that year if he doesn't get hurt. That's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about they've lengthened the year. There's more space between games. There are less back-to-backs. You know, you're not seeing the 4 and 5 nights stuff anymore. I mean, teams are regularly getting, 2 off days between games now. Or more often than ever right now. At some point, it's your job. And people could say it's their job to win titles. It's like, no. That's actually not the job. Now, the goal for the team is to win titles. You're right. But the job is entertainment. When I pay for a ticket for my team, yeah, I love my team. But I'm paying to see the players on the team. My money is going to pay for the most expensive contract on that team. I mean, for every contract, but if you're being paid the most money, guess what? You probably have top billing. You're the player we're all here to see. You're probably the little kid's favorite player on the team because you're the best one. At some point, it's like, that's really your job. Now, if you're hurt, you're hurt. If you're not, you probably should be playing. But this is going to be the thing. Because this is going to be the rub. I think we're going to end up with a shortened NBA season eventually. I'm not for it. I'm not cool with it. And personally, I'm okay with rotating rosters and stuff like that. Kind of like soccer. But I think fans deserve some heads up about that. Because I'm going to be completely honest, why would I go to a game? Or if I only had the money to really go to like 1 or 2 games a year, why would I pay money to go to a game where our top players aren't playing? Because it's not important. Why would I pay to support your product if you're going to give me the B product on a night? Which I've seen people talk, well, if you're really that strapped, you probably shouldn't be going to games anyway. And I'm just sitting here like, and I've gotten that, and I'm just kind of like, that's the most elitist thing I've ever heard. Not the most elitist, but I mean that's elitism. That's toxic. Because it's not necessarily that you can't afford to go to more games, but if you're being wise with your money, and you're like a normal family man, and you're looking for games to take your kids to, and your kid has a favorite player, if you get there that night and he's not playing and it's because of rest, what do you tell your kid when he asks, well, where's such and such? Or why is such and such on the bench? Oh, he decided he needed a rest day, son. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't just get to call into work. Like, when I was at, I get migraines. So there were days where I couldn't go into work when I was working for John Deere because it would be a safety risk. Because, I couldn't see. As soon as I was good, though, I'd be up there. If I got one of those at work, I had to I had to go, like, I had to get out of the shop. I mean, that's just, I mean, that's one thing. But hey, I need to take care of myself, make sure I don't get any migraines. I need to not come into work today. That's not how that works. That's not how the real world works. And I don't want to hear about, yeah, well, this isn't your world. This is a different world. If it's that different of a world, then I mean, at some point it's like, why care? Like, why should I? It's like, if they want to live in a different world from me, maybe I just shouldn't support them. Maybe that's it. But I love sports, and there are guys that show up every game, because like for most of the league, they're not getting load management. They're having to play. Heck, they're dying to play. They want the shine. They want the bigger role. But I don't know. I just think I'm hearing this stuff about rest, and I also hear this talk about LeBron being an Iron Man. I'm like, there's a difference between, kind of easing yourself around and picking your spots and what he does. Because people talk about him as if he picks his spots. Sometimes, sure. But there's a lot of time he's not giving out the effort. Because, that's what the other people are there for, is to give out that effort. Because I see that when he's on defense all the time. And I get he's older, but that's the thing. He has fallen off. There was a part of his career where he could go 100 on both ends of the court. 100 miles per hour. And he was, in my opinion, at that time, the most impactful defensive player in the league. Because he could literally guard anybody. He could stop anything. He could do everything. He was Giannis Antetokounmpo defensively at one point in time. So maybe not quite as good a rim protector, but I mean, he could do it all. He can't, I mean, well, when it matters he can. It's like, I actually don't think he can anymore. Especially not rim protection wise. Yeah, he can get some blocks, but he's not the same guy in that regard. And I don't think he's as good as a perimeter defender anymore. So, and I don't want this to be like, getting back into like some kind of anti-LeBron thing. Like, LeBron's one of the greatest players of all time. There's an argument that he's the greatest of all time. I'm not going to deny that, even if I don't believe he's the greatest player of all time. Although I will argue the point with people that it's closer than they think. Of course, I'm one of those crazy people that thinks Kobe Bryant deserves to be in that discussion. And I had my issues with Kobe at the very end of his career, but Kobe was my first favorite player. Before, Steve Nash on the Suns, who I would say is still probably my all-time favorite player at this point. Although, look out, Steve, John Morant's coming. I love John Morant. He's my guy right now. Of course, he's on my Grizzlies too. But, I'd argue Kobe belongs in that discussion for certain reasons. Because there's so many things that go into greatness. And there's things that I think go into greatness that I don't see in LeBron. Or at least that I haven't seen in LeBron, in my opinion, in over 10 years. So, actually, I have a massive amount of respect for, young LeBron that I don't have for older LeBron. So, But I think from a fan perspective, I'm paying to see the best version of my team every night. I might choose games because I'm wanting to see maybe one of the best players on the other team too. And if they don't play, that's bullcrap too. Because I'll say this, I know people who have season tickets to certain teams and they'll give them away. When it's a team they're not interested in seeing. I mean, of course, sometimes they just have other things come up, but it's a team they're not interested in seeing, or, the player they'd want to see on that other team. Like, we'll just use an example. I remember when Kevin Durant was on that ridiculous scoring run of his MVP season, and Russ was out with injury. I got to go see, or I was given, my dad and I were given tickets by the owner of the company or the dealership we were working for, and I got to witness that, and it was so cool. And these were Spurs season tickets, so, but I was more excited about seeing Kevin Durant than the Spurs at the time. But Reggie Jackson popped off because Russell Westbrook was injured, and that was all really cool to see, because that was also during that period of time where Reggie Jackson had his kind of big breakout that preceded him eventually going to Detroit, getting paid. But there was another game, I think. I'm trying to remember. I want to say it was a Clippers game. I think they were. Oh no, it was the Wizards. But John Wall was injured. So the Spurs just flattened the Wizards. But a group of us got to go, me and some of the other guys that worked there, because the owner giving out tickets, and one of the guys wasn't gonna, or something came up and the other guy was like, I can't go. So I ended up with the ticket, that last ticket. And it was really fun. I mean, it was fun watching the Spurs just play beautiful basketball that night. But the Wizards were just awful without Wall. So, anyway, I think it was Wall who was out. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So, anyway, I'm okay with people missing games because they're hurt and not playing injured. I get that. But I don't like this whole load management thing. I think it's a crock of crap for the fans. So, anyway, we're going to move on from that. And I think, you know what? Let's hit up some news headlines real quick. And then, whoop. I set that up, and then let's do this. Let's do that. I did that a minute ago, so it might have just been my internet blipped earlier before I started the stream. All right. Let's see here. Tiger. Masters 2 ratings. Can Tiger win if he plays? I'm not going to count Tiger out at the Masters. That would be like an incredible story if he won, considering what he's coming back from. Let's see. Eagles say shake up first round with Trey. Ooh. Let's see here. That's interesting. Nash. Simmons out of regular season and playing. Dude, Ben Simmons is pathetic at this point as far as I'm concerned. Just everything. Durant says his knee injury derailed Nets season. Love how Durant takes everything on himself. He doesn't blame other people. Kind of the opposite of LeBron. Giants Jones say neck injury in the past for quarter. So Daniel Jones, that neck injury, apparently that's not going to be a long-term thing. That's good for them. Pujols to make 22nd straight opening day start. That's awesome. For anyone who doesn't know, Albert Pujols is my favorite baseball player ever. I grew up, just north of Memphis. I grew up a Cardinals fan. My great grandmother was like a massive Cardinals fan. She watched or listened to every game. And when I moved to the coastal bend, because baseball's not Major League Baseball is not in my top 5 things sports wise, but I do follow. I really enjoy going to baseball games. I don't necessarily enjoy watching on TV as much, but the ballpark experience is super great. And I loved playing baseball. Baseball was really fun to play. I need to shift that some more. Okay. So Pujols is one of my favorite guys. We'll look into that. M's top prospect Rodriguez makes opening roster. All of MLB to wear Robinson's 42 in Dodger blue. That's cool. Davis, 2-time NL batting champion, dies at 83. Huh. Well, rest in peace to him and prayers for his family. Not sure who Davis. Really don't have time to look that up right now. We'll hit up these stories and we'll come back to the NFL tab. All right. So, let's cover this Pujols one first. St. Louis Cardinals, Albert Pujols. Oh, wait, is he back with the Cardinals? Will be DH on Thursday. Oh, because, there's now a DH in the NL, which I'm super excited about, against the Pittsburgh Pirates when he begins his final big league season Thursday. So glad that he's back. General Manager Oliver Marmol announced Monday that Pujols, who signed a $2.5 million contract to return to the club, where he became a star, will be the designated hitter for his 22nd consecutive opening day start. That matches Hank Aaron and Carl Yastrzemski for second most, behind only Pete Rose, who made 23 straight during his career. I don't want there to be an opening day where Albert Pujols isn't starting. Just going to be honest. I'm not ready for him to retire. That's crazy. I was 7 years old, I think, or 8. I was 8 years old when he started his first opening day. Golly, Bill. I know people are like, wait, but that's 21. Well, if, I'm 29, it's like, wait, but 29, when I say that's 21, it's like, yeah, but you got to think, that's from, say, opening day to opening day. That still would be 22 opening days. Anyway, Philadelphia Eagles, New Orleans Saints shake up first round with a trade. With multiple pick trade. Let's see what happens here. So the Eagles have agreed to trade 2 of their 2022 first round picks, 16 and 19, to the Saints for the 18th pick and a first rounder next year. That's a big move for the Eagles. One, I like the idea because otherwise you're looking at, 3 first round picks in 1 year. If all those hit, that's a lot. And even if you do a good job of drafting, all of those picks, they're going to come up to be paid at the same time, which would not be ideal. They're also I think they're betting on the fact they think the Saints are going to be worse next year. That's big. The Eagles will also receive a 2024 second round pick Man, dude, that's nice. Plus a 2022 third round pick and a 2022 seventh round pick, while sending a 2022 sixth to the Saints. So they're also getting second and third round picks on top of that in the deal. I mean, you're talking 2 years down the road for the Saints, throwing out a second round pick, a third round pick for this year. That's a lot of value. After the trade, the Eagles will still pick twice in the first round. Because so now they'll have the 15th and 18th picks. And dude, for the Saints, like, that's aggressive. But I mean, this trade right here, this trade between the Eagles and the Saints is indicative of both of these general managers. They're both extremely aggressive. When it comes to the draft, they are both very aggressive at wheeling and dealing. New Orleans has never been afraid of trading up, getting 2 top 20 selections, and you're pushing out a lot of the payment for that over multiple years. Yeah, it's going to cost a first rounder next year, but I mean, it's also going to cost a second in 2024 and a 2022 third as well. That's a really good haul for the Eagles because you're getting building block picks. Because a third round, I mean, you still got a third round pick. Because basically what they're doing here, what the Eagles are doing is they're trading down from pick 16 to 18. They're trading down from pick 19 to the Saints, or to, I'm going to guess, the Saints' first pick, or it might be their only pick in the third round, which means they're trading down like 2 full rounds in value this year to get a first rounder next year. So they'll have 2 first round picks next year. They're also going to have a second round pick 2 years from now in 2024. And then I guess they're trading down from their 6th round pick at 194 to a 7th round pick at 237. I mean, that's 43 spots, but, whatever. Both of those picks are basically dart throw picks regardless. Super aggressive. That's interesting. Which a team like New Orleans, one of the reasons they've been able to afford to do this is because they do such a good job of scouting the fringes, particularly in the Southeast. They do a really good job of nailing really late picks and developing guys and nailing undrafted free agent signings. Like, they do a really good job of those fringe signings. Let's see, what other news do we have here? How does a GM know if they are ready for the NFL draft? That could be an interesting article. Who wrote it? Jeff Legwold. Okay, it probably would be a good one. Projected the perfect Giants draft. Don't care. Let's see. Frank Gore says he plans to retire as a member of the 49ers. So I guess he's going to sign like a 1-year deal and retire. A 1-day deal and retire. Heck, maybe he signs a 1-year deal. That'd be cool. Source. Pats acquire. Oh, this was a big trade from over the weekend. Devontae Parker's going to New England. Kaepernick throws for scouts. I can still play. In basically 6 months, he's gone from the NFL is slavery to Please let me back in. Please let me back in. I guess slave life was better for Kaepernick. That's a weird call, cuz I don't believe that, but sorry if that joke didn't land. I still found it funny. Yeah, so I'll say this: Kaepernick got to throw at Michigan's. He got to be the honorary captain for Michigan's pro day. He played for Jim Harbaugh in San Francisco, and they have a really good relationship. So Jim Harbaugh hijacks the Michigan spring game and lets Colin Kaepernick take center stage, basically. And instead of people talking about the Michigan spring game for the Michigan players, they're talking about Kaepernick. And he did kind of like a pro day throwing session at halftime of the spring game. And he looked worse than most of the rookie quarterbacks coming out this year, to be frank. There's no defense. There's nothing. And he's missing throws. Made some good ones, but whatever. It's just like all pro day throwing sessions or like the combine throwing sessions. The only thing that's going to stand out is your misses. Oh, wow, you made throws. I mean, there's certain things about seeing arm talent, seeing mechanics, stuff like that. That matters, but it's been 6 years since he played in the league. It's over. Now he's willing to be a backup. Guess what? He had offers back then, but he was asking for $20 million a year. He wanted to be a shot at a starting job. It's the reason the Seahawks didn't sign him. The Seahawks wanted to sign him to be Russell Wilson's backup, but he didn't want to be a backup. Ooh, the Dolphins have signed a new extension with their corner, Xavier Howard. We'll see where that comes in. Texans signed former Colts running back Marlon Mack. That's a great signing. See what that is. Let's see. Oh, nope. Hit the wrong. What the heck just happened to my TV? Hit the wrong headline there. Let's see. Let's see what kind of contract. I'm assuming it's going to be like a 1-year cheapo deal. His best season came in 2019 when he ran for 1,091 yards and 8 touchdowns on 247 carries. Mack's only 26, and he's gotten less work the last couple years because the Colts drafted Jonathan Taylor and some injuries. But so he's joining Rex Burkhead, Royce Freeman, and Scotty Phillips. Mack's the best out of those guys for sure. At least he's got the best, or to me, he's the best. They kept 5 running backs to start last season on their roster, but the unit struggled in Tim Kelly's offense, their offensive coordinator. Texans finished the season last in the NFL in Football Outsiders rushing DVOA. 2017 4th-round pick tore an Achilles in the 2020 opener and missed the rest of the season. The Colts that year had drafted running back Jonathan Taylor, who replaced the injured Mack and finished 3rd in the NFL in rushing yards behind Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook. And then Taylor was awesome last year. He played in just 6 games for Indianapolis last season and requested a trade before the November 2nd trade deadline. In his NFL career, Mack has run for 2,484 yards and 20 touchdowns on 567 attempts. He also has 57 catches for 448 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's a good running back. I think that's a really solid move for the Texans. He upgrades that running back room, in my opinion. See, New England Patriots acquire Devontae Parker. In a rare trade between AFC East rivals, the Dolphins have sent wide receiver Devontae Parker and a 2022 fifth-round pick in exchange for a 2023 third-round pick. Dolphins wanted to get some value for Parker. I think this is a solid move for the Patriots because he gives them what they had hoped N'Keal Harry would be. He's also more athletic than N'Keal Harry. It also opened up some cap space, which probably allowed them to do this. So Xavier Howard agrees to most lucrative contract for quarterback in NFL history. Again. So he has agreed to a new 5-year deal. This deal is worth $50.6 million in new money and gives Howard the most guaranteed cash for cornerback in NFL history. Howard had 3 years and $39 million remaining on his 5-year, $75 million contract he signed in 2020, but had grown discontent with the deal. Entering the 2021 season, the 2016 second-round pick requested a trade in July, saying he didn't feel valued or respected by the organization that drafted him. Part of this is because they had just signed Byron Jones to, I think it was like a 5-year $82 million or a 6-year $82.5 million deal. So we're talking about 50.6 on top of 39, so that's 89.5 mil. Maybe there was a little more than 39 million on it, but left on it, but that's big money. And I'm assuming that what this is it's a 2-year extension adding $50.6 million to make it a 5-year deal. His request came during the offseason in which Miami signed cornerback, Byron Jones to a 5-year, $82.5 million contract, making Howard the second highest paid cornerback on his own team. Yeah, that's how the market works. He was just doing this to play the market. To alleviate his concerns, the Dolphins had slightly restructured Howard's contract after his trade request, which included rescinding his fines for skipping mandatory minicamp and promising to renegotiate his contract following the 2021 season. And how about that? They did it. Xavier has done a lot of good things here for this organization. Dolphins GM Chris Greer said at the NFL's annual meeting last week, "I've known him for years. I was here when we drafted him. He was my second draft pick here. I'm looking forward to him being here and helping us win." Howard intercepted 5 passes in 2021 and forced a pair of fumbles, one of which he returned for a touchdown. Since he entered the league in 2016, no other player has more interceptions than Howard's 27. I mean, and his ball production, it's consistent. He's been great, and I had him as a first-round graded corner, and he went in the second. Was a big fan of his. One of those that I got right. Oh, this is this article again. I'm sure they haven't updated this since. Oh, maybe so. What I hate about this, though, is, oh, yeah, we're getting a consensus top 10 rankings. Why isn't it longer? So these were last updated April 3rd, March 31st, March 31st, March 29th. Might mess with this later. Ooh, college football recruits you need to know. Overton, number 6 recruit in 2020. Oh, yeah, this was a big thing. So, A&M, at National Signing Day, they lost one of their big front 7 recruits to Alabama. Well, they replaced him with a higher-rated player. The number 6 guy had still not committed. He is now going to A&M. And they now, once again, have easily the greatest recruiting class of all time, ratings-wise. Emmert urges NCAA Congress talks on NIL issue. Let's see. WWE holding college tryout around WrestleMania. I guess for college athletes. Okay. Let's see. Marshall, Old Dominion University, Southern Miss exit Conference USA and join the Sun Belt. This comes on the heels of a bunch of teams. This is what I mean about the realignment stuff. After ACC title, Pitt extends Pat Narduzzi through 2030. Smart. And then one of USC's assistant football coaches died at age 45. Nickel. So prayers for his family. Let's check out these recruits we need to know for this upcoming cycle. Number 1, Arch Manning versus number 2, Malachi Nelson. Quarterbacks are oftentimes the most difficult position or projection to make for. Usually it's related to unknown variables. Since our initial rankings in 2006, only one has a pair of quarterbacks occupied the top 2 slots in the ESPN 300. The 2018 class that featured number 1 overall player Justin Fields and number 2 overall prospect Trevor Lawrence. Safe to say those two panned out. It's going to be fun to watch both Manning and Nelson develop as they open our first edition of the ESPN 300 for the 2023 class. Arch Manning of Isidore Newman High School in Louisiana. 2023 ESPN 300 ranking number 1. Player comparison. Kenny Pickett. What? I mean, Kenny Pickett was awesome this last year, but he doesn't have Manning or Arch's arm talent. And he's not, I don't think he's as athletic as Arch, which is saying something. Most of the comparison is due to the impressive, underrated speed both Manning and Pickett possess. Okay. The 6'3", 204-pound Manning is by far the best athlete of his family, and while he might look like a prototypical pocket passer, his ability to extend plays and make off-platform throws is one of his greatest assets, and that is true. He has a throw from, I'm not sure if it was this past fall. I think it was this past fall. It might have been from his sophomore year, though. But I think, it might have been from his sophomore year in 2021. He rolled out to his left, and he's a righty. Rolls out to his left, and he's got a guy coming across on a post, and he flips his hips, and is able to stop and get in. I mean, it's one of the best. It's one of the most technically awesome throws I've ever seen, and this ball just to the back of the end zone where his guy lays out for it. Like, you could say, well, the receiver had to lay out for it. Look, that throw was awesome because it was a difficult throw, and that ball traveled like 40 yards through the air or so. Maybe a little further. I mean, I'm going to say it was about 40 yards through the air. And it was just perfect. As passers, we see similar styles and mechanics between them. They are not overly loose, but when necessary, both players can change arm angles to suit the throw. Neither player is dynamic or dangerous as a pure runner. Okay. But what we like are their skills as a passer coupled with their functional mobility on the move, meaning opposing defenses need to account for both the throw and the run in every situation. And he actually has some, Arch has some really good running highlights. They might actually be selling him a little short there. Malachi Nelson, Los Alamitos High School out of California, 2023 ESPN 300 ranking number 2. Spencer Rattler. I get it from a body standpoint, 6'4", 184, long and really lean. The comparison is largely due to Nelson and Rattler's passing style. In fact, they look a lot like the same player when comparing Nelson's high school tape to Rattler's film. He has about 3 inches on Rattler. Okay. I thought Rattler was taller than 6'1". I thought he was a little skinnier. Rattler's 200? Huh. And Rattler has much more bulk on his frame. So from a measurable standpoint, there are differences. I'm confusing Rattler's measurables with another player. However, the ability to get rid of the ball in a smooth, loose, compact manner is uncanny. So, how do they compare? I'm not going to get all the way into this. I just want to see some other big moves from the Junior 300. Let's see. So, Francis Managoa, the number 5 ranked player in the 2023 300. His old Junior 300 ranking was 8th. He is uncommitted. He's an offensive lineman. 6'6", 325. My gosh. From Bradenton, Florida. He earned his 5th star in this release since 2019. IMG Academy has produced 3 5-star offensive linemen in Evan Neal, J.C. Latham, and Tyler Booker. Whew. That's a big old boy. So he's down to Alabama, Oregon, and USC at the top of the list. Okay. Defensive end Deshaun Womack, 93 ranking. He was 250 in the Junior 300, uncommitted. Playing opposite Derek Moore, top 5 defensive end in the 2022 class. 6'4", 255. Great size. He was the fastest overall player posting NFL Combine-like results at St. Francis Academy's Pro Day, which St. Francis Academy has been putting out some incredible line talent. More explosive, faster overall player than Moore. Okay. I mean, that's crazy because Moore was a 5-star. Penn State and Michigan are pursuing him really heavily. Let's see. Cedric Baxter Jr. 6'1", 210. That's good size. One-cut slasher type back. They say Wisconsin. That makes sense. He posted a sub-4 640 laser times, which is outstanding given his size and considering, he's in high school. He's still not at his peak athletically yet. He can improve on that speed. Dejon Johnson. So he's dropped. Huh. Kind of looking, there's someone I was wondering if they were going to talk about. Well, I was wondering because they were talking about top players. I was wondering if they were going to talk just about, some of the big guys who've already committed. Because they talked about Manning and they talked about Nelson. I was wondering if they were going to talk about Nico, who just committed to the Vols, but I guess not. Okay. Well, with that being said, I think I've still got this. Let's see. Oh yeah, we got conference realignment stuff here, right? So move of Marshall, Old Dominion, and Southern Miss from Conference USA to Sun Belt now complete. Conference USA looks like it's going to fall apart. The acrimonious departure of the aforementioned teams from Conference USA to the Sun Belt Conference has been finalized. The latter league announced on Tuesday in a joint statement with the three schools. The schools are officially headed to the Sun Belt for the 2022 football season, ending a spate of legal wrangling that included court injunctions to delay arbitration. The terms of the separation agreement were not released. By departing at the end of the academic year, Old Dominion, Marshall, and Southern Miss broke the Conference USA bylaws that require a 14-month notice before leaving the league. That caused the legal issues, which came into focus after the Sun Belt had already placed the three schools on the league's football schedule for the 2022 year when it was released on March 1st. Yeah, but they were already I thought they'd already made that announcement before March 1st that they were leaving. This means that Conference USA will play with 11 members next season. A schedule to reflect the league's new structure is expected to be released soon. Sources told ESPN that the odd number of programs has prompted the league to petition the NCAA for health and safety reasons to play 2 football games in Week 0 in 2022 because of the odd number of teams. There's a fear too many in the league would have to play for more than 2 months consecutively without buys. Playing in Week 0 would help space that out. Conference USA is excited about the future. Whatever. You're absolutely upset right now. There's more change on the way for the conference. Although the timing is uncertain, 6 more schools are headed to the AAC. Because this is the other thing. These 3 teams decided to jump ship because North Texas, Rice, UTSA, Charlotte, FAU, and UAB were all leaving for the American Athletic Conference. Conference USA has already announced it is adding Jacksonville State, Liberty, New Mexico State, and Sam Houston. Which, good for Liberty, I guess, because they're an independent right now. They should be able to own the Conference USA, but Jacksonville State, who's making the jump up, and Sam Houston, who is making the jump up from FCS, those will be good programs. The Sun Belt will be a 14-member league next season, as it also added James Madison in recent months, which I can't remember if the Sun Belt was a 10-team league before, or if they were 12 and they lost 2 teams. Let's see. And actually, you know what? As we go, we're going to use this as a means to talk about kind of the shifting landscape of college football, as I've put in the title. Me grinning ear to hear about this. NCAA conference realignment. Football. Let's see. College Football Conference Realignment Tracker. Well, see, that's from November 11th, 2021. I'm looking for something more recent. Seriously, there's... Okay, so... This is from February, but that's talking about James Madison. Well, let's see what ESPN's little tracker here is, because this is going to have a lot of FCS stuff too, I have a feeling. So there's a ton of change coming to college football in the next few, or over the next couple seasons. And not all of it's just realignment. Some of this is we're seeing teams come back. They look like they are very much on the comeback and they are investing heavily. The SEC, everybody's investing heavily in their programs right now. We've already seen like Arkansas take a huge leap last year. And with the transfers and the recruiting this cycle, Arkansas is poised to be even better this year and in the future. Tennessee looks like they're on the come up, at least from an investment standpoint. And year one, I think you could argue that if officiating had been a little differently, and if Hendon Hooker had started off as a starting quarterback, I look at the Tennessee's results and I see 3 games that could have been wins. 2 of them should have been, if I'm just being frank. Well, one in particular, the Purdue game should have been a win. Like, Tennessee should have won that game. Tennessee got that loss. The referees screwed them. The Ole Miss game, I think there's an argument that the referees had a massive hand in Ole Miss winning that game. And then I think if Hendon Hooker starts the Pittsburgh game, we just outright beat Pittsburgh. Because Joe Milton was so bad in that game. And I think if Hooker starts that game, we might have even won the Florida game, because I think our offense would have been clicking sooner. But, 7-6, I'm excited. Like, there's definitely breadth in the program. But look at Florida and LSU. Florida's resetting. I think they've got a coach that really is excited to be there. Like, I think Dan Mullen was wanting to jump to the NFL level. He doesn't love recruiting. He loves coaching. I think he wants to be at the NFL level. Brian Kelly at LSU is a huge needle mover. And if you want to talk about program stability, you're going to have a much more stable ship than with Ed Orgeron. Because, to be frank, Ed Orgeron has never been anywhere in the last 20 years, 15, 20 years, where the program was stable. So, Oklahoma and Texas are moving to the SEC. We're going to talk a lot about that next year. Tomorrow. That's coming. It could come in 2023. I think it's going to be 2024. But we'll see. The Big 12 is adding BYU, Central Florida, Cincinnati, and Houston, which is what prompted the AAC to add 4 teams. Those 6 schools. And I think they're losing someone else. But the Big 12, losing Oklahoma and Texas is huge. But Cincinnati, UCF are on the rise. BYU's on the comeback right now. And I think getting in the Big 12 is going to improve BYU's recruiting. Houston's been a really good program for a while, and they've had some big highs. So the future for the Big 12 is Baylor, BYU, Central Florida, Cincinnati, Houston, Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas Tech, and West Virginia. So that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So they're back to being a 12-team league. So the name makes sense again. And they've expanded the scope of the Big 12. Because you now got BYU out in Utah. You've got Central Florida. You're bringing in Florida. Cincinnati. You're now in Ohio. Houston adds, another Texas team to replace Texas. I mean, it definitely stands to reason that you're losing your two biggest name schools, like your biggest money-making programs. But you're adding one team with major college football history in BYU. Houston has a really good, rich football history as well. Central Florida and Cincinnati are the up-and-comers. And Cincinnati's been a really good team. And you're adding a couple of some really big markets to the Big 12 in Houston, Cincinnati, Orlando, where UCF is located, and BYU, which you could say the whole state of Utah. And in some cases, pretty much every Mormon football fan, That's really, that's going to be big. So the SEC is not losing anybody. And I say we because Tennessee's in it, and my biggest focus is SEC football because I watch as many games every Saturday as I can, and most of them are SEC games. Adding Oklahoma and Texas, that's going to be huge. And teasing tomorrow's show, I'm going to talk about what the SEC should look like. A proposal for what the SEC should look like with 16 teams. The Alliance. That's a funny way to put it. So now you've got the ACC. The ACC ain't losing anybody. They ain't adding anybody. But, and you know what? Let me go back to the Big 12 for a second. So here's how the Big 12 is shifting. Baylor already, they had ascended to the top. Tragedy strikes, they fall. They're now back. Baylor's back at the top. Oklahoma State's still up at the top of the conference. This is going to open up this conference for teams that still were kind of beating on Oklahoma, like having to kind of beat Oklahoma out of the way with everything they had, and had to fear Texas, finally remembering that they were Texas. They don't have to worry about that now. Baylor and Oklahoma State are the big dogs here. TCU, depending on how this next chapter is going to look for them, they're in a really great spot over in Fort Worth. Tons of talent around them in the DFW metro area. If they really attack recruiting, they've got a great campus and a great school. They should be able to grow from this. Houston, Cincinnati, Central Florida, BYU, all the things that they were using to grow in the AAC, they should, and BYU as an independent, these teams should be able to continue that here. This is a Power 5 conference. Like, their schedules are going to beef up, and we're going to see how they stand up to it. Yeah, they're not going to have Oklahoma and Texas, but having to deal with, each other, but also on top of that, Baylor, who won the Big 12 last year, Oklahoma State, who played for the Big 12 title last year. Kansas State. Heck, Kansas beat Texas last year, almost beat Oklahoma. Kansas might be a problem. We'll see. Iowa State, who have been the underachieving darlings for several years now, but that's a really good program with a great coach. You got to deal with TCU. Texas Tech is reinvesting in their program right now. And West Virginia has a history of being, or of having the ability to be a team that matters when they've got really good quarterback play. And we'll see if the new regime in West Virginia can, elevate them. The Big 12, welcome to the Wild West when these changes happen. And I really think they need to steer into this. It's a new dawn in the Big 12. And nothing is certain anymore. There are no givens. There's no glass ceiling. There's no safety net. The West is wild again. That's what the Big 12 needs to be preaching in this next era. For the SEC, I mean, as if this conference needed to get any tougher. And yeah, Steve Sarkisian's got to prove that he can do what Henson and Strong couldn't. In his attempt at rebuilding Texas, but I think the culture shift there is very apparent. And I think that's a team that was better than its record last year. But they're still having to they were still having to deal with some of the demons of the past. I think a lot of those demons are going to be excised by the time this football season comes around. A bunch of them already have. I think Quinn Ewers is the elite quarterback that they needed to elevate this program. For certain. I really do. There's a reason people were fighting tooth and nail for this guy. There's a reason this guy was able to reclassify last year. And while Ohio State was so aggressive in going after him. Of course, he ended up redshirting. He transferred to Texas, where I think he really wanted to be all along anyway. He just didn't trust the coaching staff. No reason not to trust Steve Sarkisian if you're a quarterback, in my opinion, especially at the college level. We've seen what he can do. And Oklahoma, Brent Venables is the coach with the mindset. One, he is an Oklahoma guy. Oklahoma fans are actually really excited. I think they're more excited that they got Brent Venables than they were that they had Lincoln Riley. I think a lot of people around Oklahoma, like the diehards, think they have a better coach and a coach that fits their culture better. Because as good as Oklahoma's offense has been since Bob Stoops took over, there was a defensive identity to Oklahoma that has been lost in the last 10 years. And when Brent Venables was the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma, their defense was really stinking good. When they won that 2000 national title game over Florida State, they beat them 24-3. Their defense showed out. And I think for moving to the SEC, he's the kind of guy they need to keep being a title contender in the SEC or after joining the SEC. But that's just my opinion. I just feel sorry for Vanderbilt because they're just getting knocked. I mean, you were already in last place. Now you're even further from first. And for Missouri, I mean, this really hurts the teams that are kind of on the way down right now, or were at the bottom and have just started getting up off the pavement, like Mississippi State, Missouri, Auburn. Depending on how things go, South Carolina. I mean, and this affects my Vols too. Like, I mean, this is huge. But I think it could be really great if they nail how we're going to set up the conference post realignment. Getting to the ACC, they're kind of staying the same. Boston College, Clemson, Duke, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Miami, NC State, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest. Nothing's changing there. Their 14 teams are staying the same. What's shifting in the ACC, though, is Clemson had a down year. Although it is incredible to think that Clemson, like double-digit wins for Clemson is now like a major down year. Not winning the conference feels like Clemson just fell or, is poised to finally or to fall off the national radar. And it's like, man, they've kind of gotten into Alabama territory to a degree. Dabo Swinney might be able to get back in the no one believes in us car and be believable again to his players, which is dangerous for everyone who's going to have to deal with Clemson. Duke just hired A&M's, was it defensive coordinator? Was Elko the defensive coordinator? I think Mike Elko was their defensive coordinator. It was one of their coordinators. The fact that I can't remember that off the top of my head, like, what's wrong with me? Florida State looks like they're poised in year 3 under Mike Norvell, because you got to remember that first year was a COVID year, and the culture at Florida State was just busted. I'm glad that they've stuck with Norvell, and I think, yeah, they had, you could argue, the recruiting embarrassment of losing the best prospect in the country to Jackson State, but that had nothing to do with Florida State. That had everything to do with Deion Sanders and the young man. Florida State still had a really, really good recruiting class, and they've done really good in the transfer portal. Their culture has shifted there. Georgia Tech's got new leadership going into last year. Miami just heavily invested. You want to talk about the titanic shift in college football that could come from Miami, who is now investing in football like they used to at the beginning of the 2000s, like they did during the 80s and 90s. If that Miami is back, and I think they are with Mario Cristobal, you look at the staff they've invested in too, along with Cristobal. They've got one of the best staffs in the country, in my opinion, and in many other experts' opinions. Like, people, or should I say experts, I respect opinions. That's going to be that's one of the big things that can shift this year. And it's going to take more than a year. But Miami's had a lot of solid talent in recent years. It looked like they were kind of back, and they've kind of slid partially because Derek King can't stay healthy, and some other things. And in my opinion, not having, in my opinion, the coaching staff to really elevate the talent they had, they've got that now. NC State's been really good under Dave Dorn. They're not. I don't think they're going anywhere. North Carolina is back. And when I say back, I mean everybody's like, North Carolina's never been like a great football powerhouse or anything, but they're back to being in the conversation as a really good team. And there was a few years back at the beginning of the decade, or the middle of the decade, where North Carolina had a really awesome offense under Larry Fedora. When Mack Brown was at North Carolina, they were a really, really good football team. Like during his first stint, I think North Carolina has has a name brand coach. They seem to have built a really good culture. They're getting recruits. They're getting people to stay in state at North Carolina, like top North Carolina players to stay at North Carolina. Anytime you can keep the top players in your state is always a good sign for your program. If they're not if you're able to keep enough of them, you're going to have a great team. And for North Carolina, that should mean they're able to compete in the ACC. I think Miami's going to keep a lot more of those South Florida kids than they were keeping. Florida State is going to be pulling from their region better than they were before. And we're already seeing it. Pittsburgh's for real. They just extended Pat Narduzzi through 2030. I mean, we're seeing teams like Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's had some good teams pop up here or there, but Narduzzi's building something sustainable at Pitt. I mean, they just won the ACC title. And I think most people would say that that's the best Pittsburgh team since their national championship team in 1976 under Johnny Majors with Tony Dorsett. Now, I might be wrong. Some other people might say otherwise, but I'd argue this was the best team they've had since then. That's a huge shift. Like Florida State and Miami are going to have to claw. Miami's closer still than Florida State, I would argue. But, Florida State can always prove me wrong in year 3 under Mike Norvell. Boston College has been kind of floating up in the top half of the conference. I don't know if it's going to stay that way. But Clemson's going to have a bigger fight in this conference moving forward. Virginia and Virginia Tech are resetting this year with new coaches. And last but not least, I don't really have a lot to say about Syracuse. Unfortunately for Dino Babbers, Syracuse is a basketball school and a lacrosse school. And there have been times where Syracuse has been really good, but they're not investing like these other schools right now. Wake Forest under Dave Clawson. Dave Clawson might be the most underrated coach in the country. I don't necessarily know if I totally agree with that, but he's definitely one of the most. I think he's doing an amazing job. I'd argue he and Mark Stoops probably are battling it out for the unsung hero of college football coaching. Guys who are, if you're looking at the resources they have and what they're doing with them, I don't know. They're in that handful of people who you can say these guys are literally doing the most with less. But Wake Forest is even investing. And you're seeing it in some of the talent that they've been able to get in-house, keep in-house. Jamie Newman walked out the door and it was fine because they're like, okay, cool. Now we don't have to, we know who our quarterback is. We had 2 guys we thought were on a similar level. This is Sam Hartman's team now. He chose to leave. Jamie Newman chose to leave, and now any split in the locker room was gone because, hey, Sam Hartman's our guy. Jamie Newman didn't or decided he wanted to be somewhere else. And maybe that's because he felt like Hartman was taking the team anyway, and he should have because Hartman was better. And Wake Forest played for the ACC title this year. I mean, that's crazy. Like right now, they're a better football school than basketball school. And I think people would have found that crazy 15 years ago. I would have. So, I still think Clemson's at the top of the conference, but there's a bunch of teams nipping at their heels. And you could argue, I mean, Pittsburgh and Wake Forest were better last year, so aren't they at the top of the conference? I mean, they played for the title game, and Pittsburgh did just bring in a transfer quarterback who, at his best, can, as a passer, can keep up what Kenny Pickett was doing. Wake Forest still has Sam Hartman, but I mean, Clemson's definitely out recruiting both of those schools. And you would hope that their offense would be better this year, even though they're replacing both their coordinators. But they're elevating from within. So we'll have to see, but these are guys that know Clemson's program. And to me, it almost seems like, okay, they're going to keep doing what they've been doing. And that's been successful. But Miami's coming. Miami is very much coming. Big Ten, of course, no movement there either. You got Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Maryland, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern, Ohio State, Penn State, Purdue, Rutgers, and Wisconsin. I really like Indiana's coach, and I would love to see him at a more football-oriented school. He's done some good there, but I still feel like they're just going to be all over the place. I don't think there's going to be any consistency in Indiana. Illinois has Brett Bielema now, and we'll see what he does this season. I mean, they upset Penn State last year. If he improves the recruiting over what Lovey was doing at Illinois, I don't know if Illinois can get to the top of the conference, but they're going to be tough. Iowa's got to find a good quarterback. Like, they've got to improve their quarterback position, or nothing's really going to matter there. I say nothing's going to matter. Like, yes, they played for the Big Ten title last year, but a lot of that came because Sean Clifford got injured in the Penn State game, and Penn State's backup quarterback had transferred to Kentucky, so their third-string quarterback, who really wasn't ready, and is more of an athlete, came in the game, and instead of changing the offense to his strengths, they tried to just keep doing what they were doing with Clifford, and it didn't work. Like, I think Iowa caught some lucky breaks last year. They also caught a version of Brock Purdy that, I mean, it's like every year Brock Purdy decided, I'm going to be worse this year than I was the previous year. I love Maryland's coach, but I think he's destined for a bigger job somewhere. I don't think Maryland can be any better than like a mid-tier program in the Big Ten. That's just my opinion. We'll see if they prove me wrong. Michigan's hurting because they're going to have to replace both their coordinators. One of them because, well, they destroyed that relationship. Who knows how long Jim Harbaugh is going to be there? And it kind of reminds me of like Dan Mullen, because what happened last year, Dan Mullen really thought that he was going to be an NFL coach last offseason. And it didn't happen. He goes into 2022. He didn't really want to be at Florida anymore. And that team fell apart as the year went on. it's going to be interesting to see if Michigan, coming off the best season they've had in a long, long, long time, probably their best season in almost 20 years, and if they potentially fall off a cliff. We'll see. Because they're having to replace a decent amount of talent. What they do know is they know who their quarterbacks are, but they don't know who their best quarterback is yet. Because that was a question going into last year. And they've still got that same question to answer this year between those two guys. So, Michigan State's on the up. I think Michigan State is going to be better this year than they were last year, even without Kenneth Walker, which that's going to be hard to replace, but I think the rest of the team can elevate from there. I think they're without their top receiver, too. So I think Naylor's going to the league, but they've got a guy that you could put in the argument as the best coach in the conference, or at least the hottest coach in the conference, like on the biggest hot streak. Minnesota, I kind of feel like Minnesota's on the way down right now. I like their coach, but we have no idea what the quarterback position is going to look like for them. And I think they're kind of about to be in a rebuilding pattern. Scott Frost still hasn't gotten Nebraska together, and I don't know if they can. Because, I mean, you would have thought when they brought Frost in, like with the investment, but I mean, Nebraska's not the national brand that it was. They still have one of the most diehard fan bases, and that fan base is great. They are one of the best fan bases, most positive fan bases in college football. Like, one of the most diehard fan bases in college football. And to be completely honest, those fans deserve that school being bigger. But Nebraska's kind of been replaced on the national stage by other programs that current generations think are cooler. Is the way, and are in cooler locations, is what I think. Northwestern, I think, as I love Pat Fitzgerald, I think Northwestern's about to take a dive. I don't see Ohio State going anywhere. Penn State, James Franklin just got a new extension, but I think it's kind of make or break right now for the program. Like, are you just going to be, a historic program, like a prestige program that doesn't actually win anything? I think it really depends on if Penn State, if that extension for Franklin also signaled that they were going to put more money into what is needed for them to compete with Ohio State and Michigan. Because there are things that Penn State has not been doing since before James Franklin got there, but since James Franklin got there, they hired him to compete with those guys. If you don't give him the resources to compete, though, he can't. And you're going to end up in the same spot as Iowa. And Penn State doesn't want to be Iowa. They don't want to be, we can challenge for the Big Ten title. And if everything comes together, maybe be a national title contender if that happens. No, they want to be one of the Big Ten elite. They want to be in the playoff conversation at the beginning of the year, not depending on how things break during the year. We'll see how they invest. And then you've got Purdue has a really good coach as well. I think Jeff Brom's another one of the more underrated coaches. I remember when we were hiring when we ended up hiring Pruitt at Tennessee, I really wanted us to full court press for Jeff Brom. Now, I think Josh Heupel, I think we've got I think we got a better guy. But Brom has a little more track record still at this point. And considering where he's been, building his resume at Purdue and some of the guys he's gotten in, some of the talent he's developed at Purdue, I like where Purdue's at better than where Indiana's at. But they just kind of seem like a mid-tier, program in the Big Ten. Rutgers just sucks. And they're going to continue to suck. Because they're not really investing. And then Wisconsin's kind of in that same point, or kind of in that same way as like Iowa and Penn State, where it's not going to cut it to just invest what you've been investing. Like, you're going to have to up the ante. I love the coaching staff. Jim Leonard I think is a top 5 defensive coordinator in the country. I love their defensive scheme. And I think Jim Leonard's going to be a hot head coaching name in a couple years. But once again, do you have the ability to, and are you willing to invest more than what you're already investing? Because if not, oh wow, you won the Big Ten West and then got smoked by Ohio State or Michigan. Or, because I do believe Penn State is investing again, and that 5-star quarterback recruiter Drew Aller for Penn State was big. Wisconsin's going to get to the Big Ten title game, and they're just going to get smoked by whoever wins the Big Ten East. Whether it's Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Michigan State. I really do think there's a divide in the conference between the West and the East. Like, the top 4 in the East are the 4 best, or are the 4 biggest programs. Now that might mean that, Penn State didn't have as good a record as some of these other teams that I've named, like Iowa or Wisconsin or Purdue last year. And I'm going to be frank, I don't care. I still think Penn State's a stronger program. But no movement. Pac-12, no movement either. And no improve. The only team that I see that improved this year is USC. We'll see what Dan Lanning's able to do at Oregon, replacing Mario Cristobal. But he's an unknown quantity. And in some ways, you could still argue that based on talent and the opportunity in the Pac-12, Oregon kind of underachieved. And it makes me wonder, which Cristobal was a Miami guy, but it does make me wonder if Oregon, as much investment as Nike had, and as much investment as there was in the program, if maybe they had kind of taken for granted their spot, and if maybe Lanning's able to get more investment, because it's you could say that Cristobal left because he was a Miami guy, but if you were really investing in your program, if you were really giving him the tools, would he have left here for Miami? And if Dan Lanning can sell that, he's going to have a chance to do more than Cristobal did. USC obviously went all out in hiring Lincoln Riley. They had one of the cringiest press conference introductions I've ever seen. That press conference was cringier than every video Brian Kelly has put out with LSU, with none of the charm, in my opinion. Because there's at least some charm to Brian Kelly. I get it, and you know what? I have embraced the Brian Kelly I'm wacky dad energy. I think that works at LSU. Kirby's even gotten in on the game out at Georgia now. But if USC is, once again, and you got to remember, they got hit really hard with sanctions, and there's been some turmoil. If their administration has a united front about how they're going to go forward, if they're going to support Lincoln Riley the way that they supported Pete Carroll and coaches in past decades, and invest resources at the same commensurate level that those coaches had in reference to the rest of the nation. Like if they're investing at a top 10 level, USC is going to be back. USC is going to keep more of those guys in Southern California. And that's going to be huge. Because, I mean, that's the big thing for Miami and USC is keeping – there's so much talent there, keeping more of it there. Chip Kelly and UCLA, I think a lot of people at UCLA, like, they like some of the consistency they've gotten, but, you know, they're kind of at the point of like, well, you know, we've been here before. Like, the idea of hiring you is to get somewhere more. Maybe that's investment from the university that's holding them back. We'll see. But UCLA was in a prime kind of opportunity to own LA the last, like, decade. Or at least the last, like, 6-7 years. And they didn't take a stranglehold of it. And kind of like Utah's been at the top of the conference. And Utah won the conference this past year, but they had 3 losses before they lost a 4th game in the bowl game to Ohio State. And if your best team is going to let the 3rd string receiver for, let's say, the 2nd or 3rd best team in the I would say the 2nd best team in the Big Ten in Ohio State set, you know, records on you, like tons of records and single game records on you. I mean, what are you doing? Or really, how good is your conference? Like Stanford, David Shaw's a great coach, but it's not like Stanford's, you know, where they were. I really like Oregon State's coach, but he's not going to be at Oregon State long if he keeps up what he's doing. Like, it's funny to say that Oregon State's success in comparison to their usual might accelerate them going back down to the bottom of the conference unless they nail the next hire, because that's going to be the biggest thing for Oregon State. If this guy's gone, well, if this coach continues to achieve and has the school achieving at the level that he's on track for right now, they're going to have to nail the next hire to keep it going. I don't know if they can do that. Arizona's just been a tire fire, and I don't know if they've got the guy who's going to be able to put it out. Arizona State, I think, is headed for another or back into a tire fire. Because they've just got so much controversy around them, and then you got like the Washington schools, Washington State. Washington got rid of Jimmy Lake. They hired Fresno State's head coach. I think that was a really good hire. On paper, I think it's a really good hire. We're going to see if he can recruit at Washington the way they want to recruit or they expect to recruit. There's a decent amount of talent up there around Seattle. But I think it's just going to be a little bit about investment for the Pac-12. Like, I think Washington State's administration cared more about politics than, you know, the success of their university and its athletic programs in getting rid of their current coach, or in getting rid of Rolovich. Whatever you say, and you can look at that however you want, but I think Washington State's headed for the bottom of the conference. And then Cal and Colorado. Colorado's a solid program, but once again, it's all about investment for these schools. And the Pac-12 just hasn't invested the same way. Unless they change it, they're going to continue to be... They're going to be the fit. Because even right now, you look at the names and the name recognition of USC, Oregon, Washington, UCLA. You think of the places these schools are located in. Heck, even Cal, Colorado historically, where Utah has been in recent years. Stanford. I'd really argue right now that even with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, the Big 12 is still a stronger conference unless USC comes back, Oregon gets back to where they were, during the height of Chip Kelly. And Washington's got to climb back up because, they had Sarkisian at Washington. He had built the program really well. Chris Peterson took it and did really well for a while. But, obviously these conferences, they're not shifting at all from a realignment standpoint, but there's a ton of uncertainty in the Pac-12. When two of your three, when I'm trying to remember every school that's, switched, but like this offseason, USC, Washington, Oregon, I'd argue those are your three biggest name schools for football. And they all changed coaches. They all changed their coaching or the leadership of their program for different reasons. That's a massive amount of uncertainty and change at the top. Pac-12 is a blank canvas going in this next year. Then you got the group of five. So the AAC, they're losing Central Florida, Cincinnati, Houston. The AAC is being aggressive. And they're getting some really good up-and-coming programs. It wasn't that long ago that Charlotte was an FCS team. They used to be known as UNC, University of North Carolina at Charlotte. You've got Alabama Birmingham, that's UAB. You've got FAU coming in, which FAU, right down there around Miami. Right next to the University of Miami in South Florida. Kind of replacing UCF. You've added North Texas, UTSA, Rice. That's 3 Texas schools. Rice, of course, is a little more known for baseball, but they're in the Houston area. You've got UTSA down around San Antonio. You've got North Texas, which is, that's Frisco, just north of Dallas. I think it's north of Dallas. At the very least, it's in the DFW metro area. It's big recruiting grounds that they're getting, or that, players are going to be, like high school players in those areas are now going to be exposed to other programs from different places. Getting A&M did really open up the state of Texas for the SEC in a way that it wasn't as open before. UAB is a solid program. Like, this is the huge movement because you're losing easily your 3 biggest, like your 3 most prominent teams here. That hurts the American Athletic Conference. But you're still going to have SMU. Like, let's look at what the conference is going to look like. So you got Alabama, Birmingham, Charlotte, East Carolina. You're going to have FAU now, Memphis, Navy. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, North Texas, Rice, SMU, South USF, Temple, UTSA, Tulane, and Tulsa. So they're now going to be a 14-team league. Tulane's has been on the rise lately. Man, I need to end the stream here in a minute. Tulane's been on the rise. They're in New Orleans. Like, that's a really good recruiting hotbed for talent. You've got a ton of Texas teams now with SMU, Rice, North Texas, UTSA. Tulsa's had some good teams. Like, your conference got deeper. Because USF's kind of dropped a little bit. You've still got Temple. I mean, this is a wide-ranging conference. I mean, you've got teams as far as Philadelphia in the Northeast. You now got teams as far south and west as UTSA. That's a huge recruiting bed that your conference now covers. It's going to suck for certain schools, though, because, I mean, a team like Rice, their football status really wasn't going to change too much. I mean, getting out of the Conference USA is definitely going to up your profile, but it's not like their program's going to improve that much in comparison to the teams around them. But, I mean, the Conference USA is borderline falling apart. The only thing that's going to keep the Conference USA alive is if we keep adding FCS teams to the FBS. And at some point, it's like, what's the point? Like, we really need to divide again, because the FBS, there's too many teams that aren't playing on the same level, if we're being frank. Like, the Conference USA is not on the same level as everyone else. I'd argue that outside of like 1 or 2 teams in the MAC, I don't think those programs anymore are really on the same level at this point. And I'd say the exact same about the Mountain West. I mean, you've got Boise State, San Diego State, and I mean, to me, you could throw Fresno State in there, but most of that conference, like, can't touch like even they can't touch like the top half of the Sun Belt, most of that conference, as far as I'm concerned. Let's see here. Conference USA and Sun Belt. So, I mean, look at all these teams that are leaving the Conference USA. They're adding Jacksonville State, Liberty, New Mexico State, and Sam Houston, which good for Jacksonville State and Sam Houston. Good for Liberty getting a conference. Maybe Liberty should have been shooting for the Sun Belt. But the Conference USA now, you've got Florida International. I mean, they hadn't been good anyway. It wouldn't shock me if Jacksonville State, Liberty, and Sam Houston State ended up as, top 5 teams in the conference upon joining. Or even the top 3 teams. Along with Western Kentucky. I mean, because it's not like Middle Tennessee State. Like, Middle Tennessee State's been kind of on a downward trajectory. So is Louisiana Tech. I mean, whew. And same with UTEP. And, I mean, you're getting New Mexico State. Wow. Then you look at the Sun Belt. Like, they're adding James Madison, who, one of the few teams to actually beat or win a national title that's not named North Dakota State in the last 11 years. Southern Miss and Old Dominion and Marshall, which 3 of those teams are leaving Conference USA. I mean, that's a mass exodus from the Conference USA for the American and the Sun Belt. So the Sun Belt looks really strong. Like Appalachian State is a really good football program. Arkansas State's solid. Coastal Carolina has been heavily invested. They have a great young coach who's eventually going to move on from that program. Georgia Southern, Georgia State, fine. James Madison, I think, has a lot of upside because of their location and investment. Louisiana, Louisiana Monroe. Louisiana, they decided to promote from within. They promoted their offensive coordinator. They're going to try and keep the culture that Billy Napier built going. And I think they can do it, and they're in a really good recruiting area. That offensive coordinator can say, look, Billy's gone, but I've been his right-hand man, and I know everything that we've been doing, and we're going to keep this rolling. And I've got plans of my own for some things that I think we could do differently. I think he's got a good pitch to sell, like the recruits, the level of recruits they've been getting. You're going to have Marshall in the Sun Belt now. Old Dominion, ODU just popped up from the FCS recently. South Alabama, Southern Miss, Texas State, and Troy. Texas State's in a really nice area, situated between Austin and San Antonio, and then you got Troy, and Troy's been up and down. The Sun Belt's still going to be a solid conference. I'd say after like your Big Six conferences, which I'm throwing the American as a big conference right now. Now, when those teams leave, we'll have to revisit it. But I'd say the Sun Belt's right after the American, and then after those schools lead, I think the Sun Belt's is going to be kind of close to the American, depending on how some of these other teams kind of step up. And then, of course, the MAC's not got any movement. And, I mean, the MAC's it's stale. Yeah, I think it was Northern Illinois won the conference this year instead of Western Michigan. But really, I mean, Akron sucks. No one cares. I mean, Ball State, Bowling Green, Buffalo, Central Michigan. Central Michigan hasn't been as good as it, was. Eastern Michigan stinks. Kent State. They've been on a nice run because they had Dustin Crum. I have a feeling that's not going to last because I don't think they've got a better quarterback in the pipeline. Miami, Ohio is not the program they used to be. Northern Illinois, there was a time when Northern Illinois was, kind of an upstart program. They don't have that coach or infrastructure investment right now, in my opinion. Ohio's, Ohio's not even the second best. I mean, Ohio's behind Toledo and Cincinnati in their own state. And if Dayton invests in football the way they invest in basketball, they'd be behind Dayton too. I mean, really, you're looking at Western Michigan, to me, being the only school that has consistently been on a level to compete with, higher tier programs or higher tier like the higher tier conferences, like, lesser programs. I'd argue most of the MAC doesn't belong in the FBS. I'd say the same about the Conference USA. Then you've got the Mountain West, which no movement there because no one really wants these schools. See, I had forgotten that New Mexico State was like unaffiliated with a conference. Or at least I think they were. But Air Force, Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, Hawaii, Nevada. I forgot about Nevada being in the Mountain West because they're a really good program. New Mexico, San Diego State, San Jose State, UNLV, Utah State, Wyoming. And Utah State's out there. To me, it's once again, it's kind of like a tale of two halves of a conference. Like, I'd be really interested if the best teams from the Mountain West and the best teams from the Conference USA that are left in the Conference USA got together, or like the three teams that the Conference USA just added: Liberty, Sam Houston, Jacksonville State. Were part of a conference with Air Force, Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, Nevada, San Diego State, Utah State, and then I'd throw San Jose State and Wyoming in there. Sorry, Hawaii. Sorry, New Mexico. Sorry, UNLV. But UNLV's program's trash. New Mexico's program's hot trash. And Hawaii tried to bring June Jones back, and the offer was so embarrassingly poor that he said it would be an insult to accept it. Like that it was insulting, basically. Like, that's the level of investment the University of Hawaii's at with this football program. So, but realignment's coming, and if you're looking at the way it's going, like, the Conference USA is a huge loser. I'd argue that because of some of it, I would say the MAC is a loser. Because, no, they're not losing anything, but they're not gaining anything, and if anything, it's just going to continue to draw more and more attention from the MAC. I don't think the Mountain West necessarily losing, but they're not helping themselves either. I think the Big Ten being aggressive and getting those programs, yes, losing Oklahoma and Texas is a loss, but you're at least setting yourself up to not fade away and become something new. Like, they have an opportunity to rebrand in this instance. The SEC, of course, are big winners from a money standpoint. I think the Pac-12 is losing. I think the ACC is fine because they've got so many teams like building themselves back up right now. And I like the viability of pretty much all of their programs. As contending in the conference outside of Duke, but like in football, but Duke brings things other places, and they've been solid in football in the past. But I think a lot of those schools are investing in turning things around at their programs. And then the Big Ten was already, right there with the SEC. That's not changing. Like, the Big Ten doesn't need to do anything. They're 14 deep, and they've got some historically strong programs that aren't going anywhere. And you've got teams like Michigan State and Penn State. Like, Michigan State deciding to invest more than ever before. Penn State looks to be investing heavier than they have in a while. So, with that being said, tomorrow's show, we're going to talk specifically about how the SEC should realign its conference with the moves that they've made. And I'm going to get, and I think that's going to take up a lot of the show. And I started later today. I've gone a little longer than I wanted to, though. But I did want to cover like some of the realignment news and get out. I'm kind of. It's weird to say. I'm hunting for topics right now. And maybe I should be talking about the NBA more, whatever. But I love football. And I do want to cover conference realignment because I think it's fascinating to me, like that business side of things, because a lot of these are business decisions. Oklahoma and Texas aren't joining the SEC because they think it's going to help them contend for a national title every year. They're joining the SEC because they're going to make more money, which for the university as a whole is good for the university. And it's good for the students and faculty and everyone associated with the university to make more money. Because at the end of the day, these colleges, their primary product is education. And that athletic revenue, and not to mention, the SEC is bigger in a bunch of sports than the Big 12. I mean, this is going to allow for more investment in all kinds of athletic programs, not just football. So with that being said, that's the show for today. This has been That's Being Said Live. I mean, BlindEyeLive. I'm sorry. She's that saying a bunch. This has been BlindEyeLive for a beautiful Monday, April 4th. And I will see y'all